In this video we're going to look at writing 12-mark answers for the exam. This is the hardest part of the exam, and what you need to understand is that it's not just about the content that you're including, but the structure is also really important. So once you've learnt the content, you need to think very carefully about the structure of how you set that out, and that's because the 12-marker is all about arguments for and against and evaluating those arguments, and a good structure will do a lot of the work for you in terms of good evaluation. Here's a list of example questions that you can look at. You can choose one and do one yourself. We're going to look at the very first one. I've put an asterisk, a star next to that one, because it's the only statement, the only question here where the exam board asks you to refer to a non-religious point of view. So it's really important when you look at the statements, you look underneath the statement, because it will give you a list of bullet points which tells you exactly what you must include in your answer. Usually it will say you must talk about Christian teachings, you must give arguments for and against and reach a conclusion, and sometimes they will include the need for a non-religious point of view, but that's not always the case. So here we've got the 12-mark structure that you should have glued into the front of your book, and you should be familiar with these sentence starters. They're obviously there to help you structure your answers to a 12-mark question. They're not just a set of sentence starters to kind of get you going, they also help to structure the arguments in a particular way, because with the 12-marker it's all about the argument and evaluation, and these sentence starters really give you a head start in structuring your response in a way that includes evaluation. So I'm just going to take you through the structure so that you understand what's going on. So first of all, we need to decide whether we agree or disagree with the statement. And so that should be your very first sentence, stating your viewpoint, and then that's going to set up everything else that follows. Because once you've decided your view, then you're going to select the arguments that's going to help get you to your conclusion. And what we recommend is that if you agree with the statement, then the very first thing you should argue is an argument against the statement, and then vice versa. If you disagree with the statement, the first thing you're going to do is present an argument in favor of the statement. Now, because the first argument you're going to present is one that you disagree with, you need to choose something that you consider a weak argument. So that's the first part of your answer, is to set out a weak argument, and that's where this, so I agree, and then it will be, obviously in the paper one it's going to be Christians, so it'll be some Christians would disagree. Usually you're writing about Christian teachings, but obviously in this question we've seen that we can use non-religious arguments as well. So we start with the weak argument. The very next thing we need to do is explain why it's a weak argument. So when we start with a weak argument, we need to develop it. Don't just state it, but add a quote or some teachings. So I've given you options here, so you can see that it could be a quote, it could be a teaching, it could be an example. And as we said before, the words in bold show how you can develop, or remind you that you need to develop this in more detail to get the very top marks. So we've set out an argument that goes against our viewpoint. Then we've criticized it. So that's what the first paragraph is going to be all about, a weak argument followed by a criticism. Next, the next paragraph is going to be about our viewpoint. So we want to select an argument that supports our viewpoint and that we consider a strong argument. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Again, we want to develop it, don't just state it. Add a quote, explain a teaching, give an example, one of these things to develop that. Again, I've added the and to remind you that you need to write a lot of detail, show your understanding. We don't just leave it there though, we need to consider a criticism of our view. So our view I've identified as the green, and then the opposite view is the red. So having given a strong argument, we're now going to criticize our own argument. So we're going to say why someone would disagree with that. Obviously we can't leave it there. We need to explain why that criticism isn't going to work, and that's what I've called the response. So the first paragraph is a weak argument which we're then going to criticize. The second paragraph is a strong argument that we develop. We look at a criticism of that, but then we're going to respond to that criticism. So given that structure, we can finish now with our conclusion, why it is that we either agree or disagree with the statement. And we've put lots of reasons for our viewpoint, but we've also considered the opposite viewpoint, but shown why the opposite viewpoint doesn't work and why our viewpoint is stronger. And that's really crucial, this idea of strong and weak arguments structuring the way we answer the question. So we need to keep that structure in mind, and with that in mind we can now look at different arguments. So here what I've done is I've taken a list of arguments from the mark scheme. They've given us 3 arguments for the statement and 3 arguments against the statement. And what we want to do is we want to select out of these examples the key ones that we're going to use, and we're going to put that into our structure of going from a weak argument, criticizing that, and so on. So let's just focus on the very first paragraph. We've said with the first paragraph that we're going to start with a weak argument. So I've decided that I'm going to argue against this statement. So because I'm arguing against this statement, I've selected an argument for the statement to start off with that I'm then going to criticize. So I've chosen here the quote about Jesus, marriage becoming one flesh. I've also got here a little bit about St. Paul and a quote from St. Paul in the Bible about your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, setting out in favour, supporting the statement that sexual relationships are only for married couples. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select an argument against the statement, which is my position that I'm going to argue in this example, and I'm going to use this to criticise that first argument. So we've got these 2 points. The red represents the position I'm arguing against. The green is the argument, the position that I'm going to argue in favour of. The red is arguing in support of the statement. I'm going to argue against the statement. So we've got the key content. What we now need to do is take those and transform them into the first paragraph. And you'll see that it's not just a straightforward, you can't just copy out the red and just kind of slot it in. You might need to divide it up, you might need to develop it a little bit, and the same with the green. We've got the basic ideas there. What we want to see now is how we transform that across into the structure. So this is what I've done with that. I've said I disagree with this statement as times have changed and this is not realistic. You don't, on this first part, you don't necessarily need to explain much, but I just decided that it seemed like a good idea to give an indication of why I disagree and the kind of main point that I'm going to make. But the key thing is I've decided to disagree. So then the second part is some Christians would agree with the statement. Why? And I've taken those points and just transferred them across. I've put them into the structure, so I've added a few words here and there to show how to give it kind of a smooth development so that it works as a single paragraph. You can pause and read through. I'm not going to read through all of that. Then I've taken the green statement, the statement that I've highlighted in green, the argument there, and use that to explain why it's a weak argument. You can see that I've matched them up quite nicely. But I've decided that that's not really enough, so I've given an example and I've developed it a little bit more. Pause if you need to just read over what I've written to see how it fits in. So now we've done the first paragraph, what we need to do and look at is the second paragraph. And if you remember, the first paragraph is all about presenting the opposite to my view and then criticising it. The second paragraph is all about presenting my view and showing why it's a good, strong view, including an argument against my view, but showing why that doesn't work. So again, I've just selected in green there one of the arguments against the statement. I've chosen the point about the Church of England teachings. So again, showing that there are different Christian points of view. That's really important to demonstrate good understanding of Christian teachings and that there's more than one Christian point of view on the topic. Now I'm going to criticize my own viewpoint. So I'm going to bring in an argument for the statement, going to connect that to my point to show how that could be used to undermine the point that I'm making. And then of course after that what I want to do is show that that criticism doesn't work and strengthen that. So I've got something about what the Bible teaches, and then I'm going to bring out this point here that some Christians would say that because of changing attitudes and changing society, things need to be updated a little bit. So again, let's see how that looks. So I've done that there as that kind of sandwich where I've got my strong argument, a criticism of that strong argument, and then a response to the criticism. So I've put them now in the right order. What I now need to do is transform that into the structure that I've given. So you can see here again, I've put in bold the sentence starters so you can see where that works. I've copied the points across, the green one first, the red one responding to that, and then how I would argue. You can see that with my second point I've managed to divide that into 2 points. I've connected 2 different ideas together, both that I found in that bullet point. I've also in my first point added a little bit, so again I haven't just copied out what's there, I've sort of developed my own view a little bit, and produced a nice detailed second paragraph. So again, pause if you want to read through that and see how that works. Now the final part, which I haven't done, is to just add a conclusion, but the conclusion can really just be restating your position, that why you agree or why you disagree, and just a quick recap on the main point. I hope that's been really helpful to show you the structure and how you can take the key ideas and put that into the structure. Once you've got it into the structure, you've also got evaluation built into it, because you're going from a weak argument, criticizing it, and then moving to a stronger argument and showing why that works. Here's a list of examples. You should choose one of those. Look in your book. I've often, for many of these topics, given you an evaluation sheet so that you've looked at lots of arguments. The key thing now is to select the arguments that you want to use and put them into that structure of weak argument, criticism, strong argument, criticism, and response to the criticism. So you're getting 5 points, putting that into that order, using the sentence starters that's in your 12-mark structure to help set that out. But use the ideas that are in your book in those evaluation sheets, and you've got all the information. It's just the skill now of taking that and setting it out in the right structure using the 12 marker. As I say, I hope that's helpful and that makes clear what you need to do in a 12-mark question. You can now select one of these and have a go yourself.